I mean, well, if you think about it, right, like what are we doing here? We're trying to validate the computation of the moving average. And what are the properties that are worth testing? One is to check that the first n window size values are not a number, and then check the average calculation subsequently is correct. And so this test has done it. But then maybe the next thing to ask is, what happens if you have a negative window size or zero window size? What should happen?
And then we could do the same thing with if there are missing values somewhere in the series we input.
Mm-hmm.
So I could imagine your testing file could be much, much longer than the file that you're actually trying to test.
Yes.
Okay.
Because you will probably end up writing a new function to test a different aspect of the function, that one function you implemented. So let's do an example. So this is where the name of the function starts to become important. So here what we've done is that we've created a function, a test function named calculate rolling average. But then the next thing we want to test is whether the function behaves correctly when we provide an invalid column name. So if it were me, I would write I would name this function, this test function, as still test calculate rolling average, because I want to put the function name there, and then put an underscore to describe the behavior that I'm testing. So I would say something like moving a calculation is correct. And then I would create a new function, but this time the name would be, it's still gonna be same test calculate rolling average, but this time it will be underscore valid column name, something like that. Usually in practice, you will discuss this with your team, what's a good naming convention to follow. But yeah, for the sake of this recording, yeah, let's just say this is the convention we follow. Test,
Okay.
function name, and then what behavior.
So here we're testing whether it's a valid column name.
That's right. So what we can do is, so in our test data frame, we have a data frame that has the column name mynums.
Mm-hmm.
So for our test column name, let's put something besides mynums. Okay, and then what would you like to happen implementation wise? What should happen when someone calls our function calculate rolling average, and they inadvertently gave the call name argument a string that doesn't exist in the testdf?
So, in this case, it's one of those examples where it probably shouldn't work, and it should warn the user with a clear error message of why it's not working.
That's right. So in other words, we should have the function fail and by raising an exception,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in pytest, yeah, this one is a bit fuzzy to me. Let's Google pytest raise exception. Let's look at the first one. And so the way to do it is, scroll down. What expected? This is what we want. So see, the way to do it is in pytest is to use the context manager. with pytest.raises, and then the exception.
Okay.
And then later you can assert on the value of the exception.
So we're doing this within our test.
Mhm.
I'm just going to copy this code here as an example. So we're going to do with.
Not over there. You want to do it after you define your inputs. So starting from row 25. Yep.
And in this case, we should get a very particular error.
Mhm.
Um,
This is something that, go ahead.
well, I was wondering, do we need to give a specific error here?
Mm,
We probably
We-
should,
yeah.
but
We should, yeah.
so
So usually in big software projects, it's quite normal to define our own exception classes. Like for example, by default, Python has exceptions for, like key doesn't exist. What else? The stack trace thing, for example. I don't think that's specific. That's runtime error, right?
yep.
But if you have a big enough software project, it might make sense for you to have an exception specific for invalid inputs. Right. But in our case, I'd say let's just settle for one of those built-in exceptions, and I think attribute error is a good choice. Is there such a thing as?
There is.
Okay. And then, yeah.
Now this is
the-
just a generic name, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm guessing this stands for exception.
Yep.
No reason we can't use theirs.
Mhm.
So
And
now,
then, yeah, that's the part you call you could have defined the expected, well, in this case, there's no notion of expected output, so you can delete the line because we know that the function won't return.
that's right.
And you can also delete the testing line. And then now we need to assert on the exception return. You might want to use an F string.
Sorry, I might want to use what?
An F string to print out the column name.
Good idea. So
And then in the string of the exception info of the value attribute. Okay, and then we can run the test, but yeah, delete that. Yeah, okay. And since Thailand is complaining about line 27, let's also delete the actual output because it's not used anywhere. No, I meant just delete the assignment to the actual output.
where?
The actual output equals, delete that. Delete the actual output. Yeah,
Oh,
because
because
it's an unused variable.
I see.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So let's run the test.
And so we're following that pattern of writing a test we expect to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Key error.
Key error. That's not expected at all. Okay. Let's,
Okay, because it's running get lock with a key.
yeah.
So
It captured. So right now, the way we've implemented that function, it's relying on pandas, right?
mhm.
So when pandas can't find the column name, it will raise a key error exception. But wait, we don't want that, because if you read the message from pandas, it's not human friendly, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah. So that's why we want to implement our own logic to detect when the column name doesn't exist. So I would propose if to have a check that the column name exists in the data frame first, and if it doesn't, return this attribute error exception with the right message.
Could I suggest why not just create our own exception?
Yeah, we can do that, but just for the sake of time,
Okay.
the scope right now is to focus on TDD, right?
Yeah.
It's not to create exception clusters.
So to raise a particular error, it's been a while since I've done this. We're gonna run try.
Yes.
Uh,
Oh wait, no. No. We just do an if check, and then if the name doesn't exist, just raise.
okay. So if call name of course now I can't remember how to get the column
What is
names.
df.names?
df dot
No,
names.
df.call names. Wait, can we count on autocomplete to figure it out? Try just do df dot and then see what happens.
Columns.
Columns.
Call names is R. That's the function in R that does it.
Is it?
Yeah. Same with names. That's what I was saying. I was thinking of R, and I was typing names. Okay, so df columns.
I think you meant not in. And here also is a good thing to talk about best practice. In terms of writing code, there could be cases where you want to write your function your input has to pass a few checks before you actually process it. So one way to do it is to write, if this is true, then okay, check another thing. If this is true, check another thing. That works, but the problem is you have a lot of nested if statements. So that's that's ugly and also kind of hard to read. The best practice here is to do your checks at one level and always check for failures. And when it fails, immediately exit the function. So that way you only have one level of ifs. So that's why I say, instead of doing if column name is in the data frame, I think it's better to do if the column name is not in the data frame, then raise the exception. Otherwise, you have to do an else and then raise the exception.
Okay, how would you do that?
So not in.
Not in.
That works right in Python, not in. Or should it not go in front of the column name, and then put a parenthesis in between or the exclamation mark?
Is that how it works?
I'm not sure. Well, let's try.
Yeah.
Okay, and then semicolon.
I think not in works. Am I thinking of R again?
Yeah, I'm thinking. I think so.
Oh gosh.
But I think both will work. R in Python.
Yeah, I think it's if not in.
Okay.
Let's try it.
then you can, so if the column name doesn't exist, then raise that attribute error exception. And then I think if you put parentheses, you can specify the error message. Yes, as an arc. So this is where you write the descriptive message for the end user. Is that the same as what we wrote in the test case? It's not a valid column name, period.
Does not exist.
Oops.
We'll use this language. Gosh. Okay.
Okay, so I think implementation-wise we are done. So let's run the test. Two tests, two pass, yes.
There we go. Now, it would have thrown a different error if these messages didn't align.
Yeah, it
Okay.
would have. It would have said, well, I can't recall the error message, but it's definitely an error because it's not the same. It's the same type of exception, but the message is different.
Okay.
So that's also an error.